It's May the 29th, 2013. This is 508, a show about Worcester. Today on the show is Brendan Melican, and guess what we have, Brendan?
What do we have?
We have a 3D printed copy of the Turtle Boy.
Look at that. That is amazing.
Yeah. That one's kind of fragile.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It cracked, but yeah.
It did crack. Where did this come from?
This was printed by a friend of the show, Jack. And it's made out of ABS plastic, and there's a digital model online.
Yeah.
Theoretically, people could have this machined from platinum or titanium or wood or something.
Sure.
We just happen to get it in ABS plastic. I don't know. Have you ever seen a 3D printer in action? You know the concept
I have.
of this.
Yeah. Well, a bunch of architects that we work with now use them for renderings as opposed to your traditional watercolor BS kind of early stage rendering.
They print a building?
They'll do a 3D model, a mock-up of a building, because it's once you have something in a CAD program, it's trivial to go from either dump it into a 3D printer or just send it out to a printer for an actual paper print job. So a lot of folks are actually doing mock-ups to show off in advance because they're a little bit sexier than paper drawings.
They are.
But this is the first local icon that I've seen, and that's pretty amazing.
I have to say too, as part of this project, I've just ended up staring at photos of the Turtle Boy, the Turtle Boy statue itself, as well as
there you go. I don't want to break that.
As well as I don't even know, as well as staring at it as this 3D model for hours and hours. This is a great statue, Brendan.
That is a great statue.
It's a really beautifully made statue. Every single aspect of the statue is so elegant and nice.
I would be more than happy to contribute some funds to get viewer Jack into pumping these out so we could start giving them as gifts on the show for special guests.
How much would you pay? Let me ask you, how much would you pay for this statue, for example, if it wasn't cracked?
I don't know. I mean, because I'm actually kind of fascinated by 3D printers, so I've looked at the price of the resins and whatnot that you use.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, once you bought the printer, right, what's it worth more than the designs are free, they're out there, and then the plastic is really the cost once you own the printer.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, that's, I think, the interesting thing about 3D printing, right? I mean, as kind of like a disruptive technology, is that you kind of remove so much of the value away from manufacturing.
Right.
Buying something like that, you probably spend way more than
it's
it would actually.
unclear how much it is.
It's unclear.
How much it should be worth.
I don't know.
I don't. It's it used to be how much is this picture worth? Well, I don't know how long did it take you to make it. Now it's how much is this picture worth? Well, color copies are probably around $1 a sheet, so it probably is about $1.
Right. Once the original is done, and the mock-up is out there, or the designs are out there, the value dissipates. It's interesting stuff.
How much is the new Daft Punk album worth? About a minute of my time finding it for download.
Exactly.
So today on the show, we're going to talk about a couple of things. I guess we're mostly going to talk about politics stuff, I guess, this week on the show. There's been a lot of resignations in the last week impacting Worcester. Former Worcester Mayor and Lieutenant Governor Tim Murray has resigned from being the Lieutenant Governor under a bit of a cloud, and he's going to become the head of the Chamber of Commerce in Worcester. John Frizzolo has resigned from being our state rep under a cloud. Joe O'Brien, not under a cloud, bucking the trend. City Councilor and former Mayor Joe O'Brien is not going to run for City Council again. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of gaps. And we have local elections. Also, it's happy birthday, Holly! It's Holly's birthday today.
Happy birthday.
It's also we have a special Senate election coming up.
Yes.
Real soon. But we also have these. We don't talk about these things. This is a show about Worcester. We're going to talk about the upcoming elections for City Council and School Committee. These are the two elected bodies that sort of deal with the city of Worcester and what kind of all this money and all this stuff and these school buildings and these streets and sidewalks. All of this beautiful, amazing stuff is dealt with by the school committee and the city council. So, something that we have done, inspired by the great media pundit Jay Rosen, is to ask people, I shouldn't say what issues. Let me phrase this in a simple way. What do you want the candidates to be discussing as they run for election this fall? What do you want to hear them talking about? And so on this show, we can get into horse race stuff. We can get into who is part of what political machine. We can get into who has what relationship with Tim Murray or whatever behind the scenes. But we don't really focus on that on this program. We're interested in to try to focus on the real stuff, and we're interested to ask you and to ask other people face to face, what is the real stuff? So this is a show where we're going to try to come up with our list of questions that we want to ask people whenever we interview them on the show, the questions that we want to hear people talking about when they're doing debates, the kind of questions that we want to hear other interviewers asking the people. And to the extent that anyone actually talks about this stuff during the campaign, we will report what they said on this show. To the extent that they talk about other stuff, we will generally, I think, ignore what they're saying. To the extent that people are doing whatever kind of weird campaign stunts, again, I think we'll tend to ignore them on the show unless they're
really
super
cool
good.
stunts.
Unless they literally involve barf bags,
Fire.
something about fire, sure.
Motocross bikes is
Or-
always a big winner.
The Wire, referencing The Wire.
Yes.
But anyway, so we got a lot of potential questions here, Brendan. Let me run these down, and we can get your 2 cents as we go through this. Slot machine, slot parlor in Worcester. Big question people want asked.
Yeah, and that's an easy one too. But it's at the same time it ties into a bigger question about development overall. You know, what I mean, because the slots parlor question can be summed up in one word, right? Are you in favor or you're not in favor? Yes or no? I mean, it's that it.
Yeah.
It's that simple. But it does tie into a bigger, which I think we touched on last year when we're doing these questions with potential candidates, is what views on development as a whole and where something like that fits into it.
And what city government's role is in development,
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. So slot parlor was one thing. We can also run through the questions we asked last time. I think we asked too many questions last time, and some of the questions we asked last time were easy to evade.
Right.
So I think this time we want to try to get down to maybe just like 3 or 4 or 5 questions that we're going to focus on the show. What's your position on school privatization? Information to access to city information. You know, the police or whoever have all this information. How should people have access to it? Local government's role in regulating our day-to-day lives. Candidates' personal vision for the city. Questions connecting to sustainability. The relationship between the city council and the city manager. Neighborhood councils, and the city's responsibility for development. Somebody has suggested that we should talk about City Square, that City Square seems to be not going off the rails, but deviating from the original vision a little bit, that we're getting a lot of just like big buildings that have nothing really going on the street level,
Right.
which is just sort of like, kind of like what was there before,
It goes
plus
back
a
to the
road.
development question. I mean,
Right.
I think a lot of people were excited when we first saw those watercolors that now would probably be a 3D model.
That there would be
of,
hot
City
dog
Square.
vendors
Yeah,
and children
there'd
with
be-
balloons.
And we've banned just about everything that we got excited about seeing walking around on those sidewalks.
We're just going to have these monoliths, impenetrable monoliths. Appropriate use of eminent domain is one thing that people have asked about. The role of the Worcester Redevelopment Authority is something that people have asked about. That's a city.
Well, and it's an authority, so it's a
Okay.
quasi-governmental agency that
Okay.
it actually has powers assigned to it. I believe it's under the state constitution or the state, the MGL. But we have a WRA that really hasn't been active for a long time. Whereas if you look at Boston, the Boston Redevelopment Authority has been, pretty much the big mover of economic, big mover in terms of economic engine and development, going back to, I think it was the 60s. Or maybe it could have been actually the 50s, but the Nixon administration, yes. And that was, that's really been the thing that has led quite a bit of the development in Boston. Not all of it, but a significant portion. Ours is pretty much dead. We have it. But what we also have that seems to have gotten more of the attention over the last decade or so has been the Worcester Business Development Corporation,
Right.
which doesn't have a lot of the same legal powers that a quasi-governmental authority like the WRA would have.
So we've seen the WRA in recent months. We've seen there being a lot more activity around the WRA.
It seems. I mean, I think a lot of it is just speculation as to what their future role in the city might be.
Right. Well, I mean, we've seen like lots of items up before the city council
Yep.
and reports and whatever's around the Worcester Redevelopment Authority. So I think just questions about what's going on with that would be somebody has asked about that.
That probably ties it directly to the question about eminent domain, because that
Right.
is something that, as a governmental entity, would have more power or more sway over matters such as eminent domain than a fully private entity such as the Worcester Business Development Corporation.
People have suggested that we should ask about dealing with wicked problems. Wicked problems is a term which I'm not going to be able to remember the exact definition of right now, but it's basically that there are problems which there is no good, clear solution. like, honestly, everybody will admit there's no good, clear solution to certain problems. And so
it's not just like a regional colloquialism, like like
it's
that's
not
a
like
wicked problem.
not as in
like,
wicked good. No,
Okay,
I'm not from New England, and I do not use the word wicked in any but the witch sense. So wicked problems would be problems, for example, like the city's auditor is retiring soon. We're going to have all these pension liabilities coming up in the city. Our pipes are old. We're always having these fights with the Environmental Protection Agency in the city. And so some sort of question about wicked problems would be along the lines of how should we be going about finding the least bad solution to these problems, rather than what do we do about the old pipes, saying like, what would you like the process to look like as we try to think of how to deal with our aging 150-year-old sewer pipes.
Right, because it's gotten to the point where, like, using those as an example, replacing them piecemeal or repairing them piecemeal would take forever.
Right.
And would be so costly it's not even really almost worth the effort in the rate where they were going. But almost reinventing the wheel to come up with a new system is probably the only way to tackle a problem like that.
Yeah. A couple of people on Facebook actually really want us to ask about chickens.
Really?
You know, the city council, what did the city council say that it might be okay for people to own chickens, and then the city said we would have to hire somebody because there would be a lot more inspection work involved if people were allowed to own chickens in the city, and then the city was just like, well, whatever, we're not going to hire somebody, so forget about owning a chicken.
They kind of walked away from it, and apparently everyone just went out and bought chickens anyways.
There's a ton of people in the city with chickens. So this is maybe a good question to ask people too about, like, yeah, I don't know. Do you want to see the city crack down on all these illegal chicken owners?
We'll have a dangerous fowl ordinance.
We're going to talk about Bill Eddy in a second. Urban agriculture, various green kind of stuff, sustainability stuff, transparency. A lot of these are things which we sort of asked the last year too. Somebody said that we should ask school committee members about computer science curriculum. We might not actually cover the school committee race this year. Like, we tend not to cover races that we have a personal conflict involving, and Tracy Novick, longtime panelist on this show, has been on the school committee for a couple of terms now and is running for re-election.
Yeah.
And so it might be just fun to have Tracy on the show throughout this election season to talk about other stuff and not worry about covering the school committee race. So we may actually not cover school committee on this program because it's just such a weird thing to have a panelist who's running for an office that you're theoretically covering. So that's like the big list of stuff. Then also, as a bonus, of course, we need to ask them something a little bit ridiculous. I think we go back to, this is again something I should have written notes down about because I'm not going to remember. Was it the mayor of Reykjavik?
In Iceland, yes.
In Iceland some years ago, it was this guy who was this sort of like comedian / performance artist guy.
I think by profession he's officially a clown.
Okay, he's a clown.
I think he's a classically trained clown.
And he was elected during this time of great economic turmoil in Iceland to just to be like, we're not going to hire some dirty politician or lawyer or something. We're going to hire this crazy Abby Hoffman type figure. And one of the things that he said was that he was like, my political party will work with any politician from any party as long as they've watched every episode of the television show The Wire.
Perfectly reasonable.
And it's perfectly reasonable. It's perfectly reasonable. Not only, first of all, it's obviously hilarious. Second of all, The Wire is like this sort of novelistic treatment of the organizations that generate power in a city, from unions to government to the newspapers to the police to the drug dealers to the school teachers. And so I guess the idea being, like, if you've seen The Wire, at least we have a common vocabulary. We can talk about Amsterdam and whatever, and you'll know what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
And you know that if you do not play, you cannot lose. Or I should say, you cannot lose if you do not play.
And you also know that the game is rigged.
And the game is rigged.
Yeah.
And a man has got to have a code. So the last time around, we asked people, who's your favorite character on The Wire? To which some candidates could answer and some could not, because they haven't seen The Wire. And honestly, if you haven't seen The Wire, I think if you're running for city office, you would actually get a huge amount out of The Wire, but I don't want to tell anybody that they need to watch 50 hours of television.
No, but it is one of those things that, I mean, even if you live in a city and you kind of like the idea of living in the city, it's a pretty, even though it's it's fiction, I mean, it's still a really good overview of the relationship, as you said, of all these different entities that function in the city and keep those kind of engines running.
It's a good show.
It's a great show.
There might be too much sex and violence for some people. And swearing.
I'm pretty sure everyone that's seeking office this year is of age.
All right. Well, some people don't care for that in their television. Another question that we asked people the last time is how much can you bench, which is inspired a little bit from that movie Best in Show.
Let me ask you a question. This may be a little bit off the path. How much weight do you think I could bench press? Just make a guess, ballpark figure.
Absolutely.
315 pounds. I mean, I was in top shape. I don't know if I could make it down to the end of this arena and back. Now, deadlifted over 500.
And that, I think, is a completely valid question, but I also think it's one that everyone had a really hard time with because, well, we don't have a lot of people hitting the gym. I was actually thinking, as you were talking now, that either pull-ups or push-ups might be a more reasonable sort of feat of strength.
Because they could just do it on the show.
Yeah, I mean, they could even find out in front of us. Or, I think it's something someone's more likely to be able to gauge what their ability is. If you've never actually tried to bench press, just coming up with a number is probably difficult.
How many push-ups can you do?
Push-ups?
You're super wiry and you go to the gym.
Yeah, no, a fair amount.
I can only do 25.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be up there with you. The most that I'd ever done was just under 60 in a minute.
Man, in a minute?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Is this when you're in the military?
No, it was in the mid-50 range. I was never in the military.
So those are, and I have to say, just to clarify, because we should spend a lot of time talking about our criterion for asking candidates, how much can you bench? Lifetime, 1 rep max.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Bill Coleman
But this is all we need.
was probably the number one person, because Bill Coleman, when he was younger, could bench some ungodly amount of weight.
It was like the entire east side of Worcester.
500 pounds. People can watch that episode and find out how much it was.
Well, we could probably ask the folks from Go Local Worcester who stole the photograph from that episode for their city council wrap-up.
I'm sure that I'm sure that their website is under a Creative Commons share alike license, so it's totally fine that they use our photo of Bill Coleman.
Yeah, but that's one. I think their other problem is too. If someone who is seeking attention for their candidacy goes out and tries to max out, and they slip a disc or something like that, I would hate to be liable for somebody's medical costs because they were trying to impress us.
Maybe. So, I guess we got to figure out what we're going to ask people. So I guess we got to figure out what dumb questions we're going to ask people too. I don't know if they're dumb questions. They're just, I feel like many journalists ask people a lot of softball questions which are in actuality ridiculous. Yeah. But are not on the surface ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of times too. I mean, it's you think of a politician, you're automatically interested in what their ideas of policy are. But that said, it doesn't really tell you anything about who they actually are as an individual in terms of their character.
Yeah.
I always think, I'm sure there's going to be some people watching who think it's a cheap shot, but I still think one of the greatest things in recent political history in terms of interviews was Katie Couric asking Sarah Palin what newspaper she reads, right? I mean, such a simple question, and that one simple question that pretty much went unanswered gave a massive amount of insight into who Sarah Palin was as an individual and kind of changed the way she was viewed by a significant portion of the country. Some of these questions, even though they're trivial, they also do give you a little bit more insight into somebody's personality and their character beyond, like you said, the softball questions about policy that people are probably rehearsing in the mirror as we speak right now.
So, what do we want to ask people? Because some of these questions we asked the last time, I don't know. Neighborhood councils. Do I have a pen? Let me get a pen. Can you draw on this? Can you draw on this maybe?
Sure. What would you like me to draw?
Could you cross off the one about neighborhood councils? Because we ask people neighborhood councils. Everybody basically says that they're in favor of neighborhood councils, and neighborhood councils don't seem like they're very close to being a thing.
No,
and so
and it's funny though, because that's one of those things that I think it's very cyclical. Either you have people discussing their want and desire for neighborhood councils, or you have people discussing their want and desire or opposition to strong mayor. Rarely do you hear those two things spoken at the same time frame or general time frame. And it seems like more and more people are somewhat grumbling around the idea of a strong mayor push in the city. Both on the council, you hear some people talking of it, and then the city as a whole. I think a lot of that is just because you look at your average lifespan of a city manager, and Mike O'Brien, I think, is kind of hitting that point where you tend to see people some turnover in that role. So I think that's the sort of thing that always kicks off that conversation.
So you have more orderly succession if you have elected executives rather than appointed executives.
I think that might be a question that might be worth throwing out just to see what people's thoughts are in our form of government. But again, it's an easy one.
Let's say this: we're going to ask somebody some kind of question about slot machines / economic development.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
What's that? How do we phrase that question?
About yeah, that's a right.
Yeah. Would you like to see a slot parlor? What about just like, would you like to see a slot parlor? Would you like to see this proposed slot parlor materialize? And what would be your bare minimum mitigation agreement that would need to happen?
Yeah, because hopefully, I mean, the folks that are running for office in the city are going to find themselves better informed on what could actually go into a host agreement, more so than we have been. I think taking that and tying it into a larger economic development picture, would you be in favor of a slots parlor, yes or no? And then how do you see that fitting into a long-term vision for economic development in the city?
Okay, so that's a two-parter.
Yeah. But it could go either way, right? I mean, because the absence thereof also impacts economic development, because we're still stuck with a 14-acre hole in the ground without a slot parlor.
So we're sort of asking this economic development question, but we're tying it around that brownfield.
Because I think fairly so in a way, only because that's the one significant development package that's on the table now. In the same way that years ago, City Square was the one significant development package that was going to eat up a huge parcel of land one way or the other. And even if you were opposed to it, you still would hopefully have some idea as what you would rather see taking place in that region.
I think we should ask about chickens too, because chickens seems like it's a similar generality / specific question where you can say do you think that people should be able to own chickens in the city of Worcester? Mm-hmm. And do you support the city in spending money to hire somebody to do that? Or how do you want that all to shake out?
Mm-hmm. And yeah. No, I mean, in the chicken one, I think though it also falls back on how do you propose dealing with the folks who already have them.
Okay, so this is a question which is do you support chickens? Do you support chickens in the city of Worcester? If the answer is yes, if the answer is and if the answer is no, then explain to us why this is
it could just be
why
a bigger
this is
question
wrong.
Too of why do you support the idea of urban farming? On any scale.
Okay.
I mean, that's something that whether it be backyard gardens of the Victory sort, or something involving some form of live animal and whatnot. I think everybody would have a different tolerance for what is appropriate in an urban area, and a lot of cities are dealing with those questions, and I think they only seem silly until you're actually faced with having to deal with those questions yourself. Should people be allowed to have their front yards taken over with a garden as opposed to only in the back? You've got a lot of cities that actually have zoned out what areas of people's private property can be used for things like gardening and small scale farming and whatnot.
So this is a question which is do you support urban agriculture? Is basically to say, well, chickens have been this thing people have talked about, should you be able to own chickens in the city? Do you support urban agriculture in Worcester? And how would you like to see the city deal with these problems that are apparently going to come out of this involving having to hire inspectors and whatever if this kind of activities happen?
Right. Yeah,
okay.
Because ultimately that's what it comes down to. Is it something that the city even needs to be involved in? Mm-hmm. Do we need a parakeet inspector or a pigeon inspector as well too, or can we just take for granted the fact that chickens have been around humans for quite some time and only become a problem with the flu every 10 years or so?
You know what happens when people own chickens? In Bill Hetty's mind,
what's that?
People get eaten by foxes.
They get eaten by foxes, and next thing they'll be asking for goats, and it steamrolls from there.
If you have a goat, we're gonna have mountain lion attacks in the city. Anyway. You know where it ends? It ends with people dying.
Everyone dies.
So
one chicken.
So we got chickens. We got slots. What else is on there that seems like? What else is on? What is sticking in your mind here? What else do we need to ask people?
Well, trivial questions. I had mentioned this to you before. I would love to see people be able to rattle off, everyday carry items.
Okay.
I think this is probably not something that's relevant to a lot of folks, but I mean, as someone who has a hard time leaving the house, like in an OCD sense, with a set number of things that, always have lots of things on me, but every day there are certain things, usually chapstick, a tin of Altoids, my wallet, and a pocket knife, right? I mean, and a pen, Fisher Space pen. I just can't leave the house without those things being on me. I'd be really curious to see both existing candidates or existing officials and candidates for office, the things that they actually leave the house with every day. Because again, it's a character thing, Do
we want to ask about the wire?
I think the wire can fit in there too, and
do we want to ask about how much you can bench or how many push-ups you can do? Lifetime max.
Personally, I would go for push-ups,
okay.
And I would love to actually see feats of strength. I would actually rather people hit the deck and show us what they can do, either push-ups, pull-ups, something along those lines.
Some of these people are old.
Well, they are, but I mean, we're asking people to stake out a leadership position here, and I think that's I think there's a physical component to a stamina component to the leadership role as well.
All right, so we got chickens. We got 3 dumb questions. We got chickens. We got slots.
You had the last year was sustainability and the personal vision for the city too. I mean, those are the sustainability thing probably ties in to some extent with the urban agriculture if we're going to be asking that. I don't know how far we have to go beyond that.
That sort of seems like it can spin into sustainability, the urban agriculture. Plus, I don't feel like anybody had any good answers as far as sustainability. I also don't know that people had personal vision for the city would be a good one to ask.
Here's the question: do you think Worcester is sustainable?
Okay, so there's a sustainability question. Do you think Worcester is a sustainable
city? In its current trajectory. I mean,
yes.
that question could actually lead to some interesting conversation. I mean, it's basically, are we doing things right now, but in a sort of roundabout way.
Right. And we could we also ask a question like, do you think that Worcester's does Worcester's trajectory over the last decade, like, is that leading to something which aligns well with your personal vision?
Mm-hmm. Or, along those lines as well, too, any other cities, either in the Commonwealth or elsewhere in the country or elsewhere in the world that you would think have ideas that we should start leaning on.
What cities? Okay, so we got ideas. Like, what cities? What ideas from other cities would you like to see Worcester try?
People get so angry with the Providence and Boston comparison.
Is Worcester a sustainable city? Chickens, slots. That seems like 4 questions.
That's
Plus 3 dumb questions.
Yeah.
If we can't do long interviews with people over that, we need to hang it up.
Yeah, it should probably be the last season.
We're running out of time. I want to run through who's going to run for office. In the past, we've actually gotten a good number of the challengers for the city council to come on this show. So we may be able to get more people this year on the show. And if you are running for office or you are involved with a campaign, please contact us at pieandcoffee@gmail.com, and we will be happy to have you on the show. And now you know the questions you're going to be asked. Challengers for city council. Again, incumbent Joe O'Brien, not running for re-election. Challengers: Bill Coleman, perennial candidate; Carmen Carmona, sometime candidate; Mesfin Bashir; Michael Gaffney; Mo Bergman, active in the city, sometime candidate; Peter Cush, and William Figba. Is it Figba? Sorry if we're mispronouncing your name. Incumbents on the council running for re-election: Mayor Joe Petty, Kate Toomey, Connie Lukes, Mike Germain, Rick Rushton. District 1 race will be between incumbent Tony Economou and challenger Chris Rich. District 2 between Emperor Palpatine and challenger Jonathan Cortez. District 3, George Russell, unopposed. District 4, Sarai Rivera, unopposed. Although I want to get her on the show because the last time
arm wrestling,
I challenged her to arm wrestle and we didn't have somebody to hold the camera, so I said I was going to arm wrestle. We still need to make this arm wrestling thing happen. That's the test of strength.
Is it supposed to be Councilor Palpatine or Senator Palpatine? Wasn't it Senator? I mean, he wasn't the Emperor until after he had kind of. He wasn't really Palpatine at that point.
You don't call him
right?
Emperor Palpatine?
I don't know. I'm asking.
Palpatine.
My canon is
just the Emperor.
But the Palpatine
like the last
thing,
Emperor.
the Palpatine thing is really what makes it sticky.
Councilor Palpatine versus Jonathan Cortez.
There's going to be a viewer who has the answer.
District 5. This is the key thing. District 5. The councilor who, though he does not deserve all of the abuse that we have heaped on him, because we have heaped so much abuse on him on this program. Bill Eddy, incumbent in District 5, running against my favorite Worcester City Councilor of all time, coming in as a challenger after years of triumphant elections for the school committee and the City Council and everything else. Many years, the City Councilor who got the most votes at large of anybody, Gary Rosen.
All in an effort to lose weight.
I love Gary Rosen so much. I disagree with Gary Rosen so much, and I love him so much. I am so excited to see a Bill Eddy Gary Rosen race for the District 5 seat. For the schools, we have incumbents O'Connell, Biancaria, Calorio, Foley, Monfredo, and Novick running for re-election, and we have challengers Doug Arbetter, Hilda Ramirez, Robert Cohane. If you are a challenger, give us a call. We'd love to have you on the show. If you're an incumbent, we will also consider it. We frequently have a no politicians rule, but I think we can bend it.
Yeah,
we'll
for the season, I think it makes sense. In a way, it's unfair. I think, especially with contested district races as well, too. If somebody wants to come on, it's only fair to have the incumbents on at the same time.
We're running out of time, Brendan. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you too, Turtle Boy. We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.